Tonight's special guest is Monsignor David Tonks. Sometimes in our busy commercial world we forget that Christmas and religion go together. So we invited Monsignor David Tonks, a Roman Catholic priest from Parnell, to visit The Beat Goes On and remind us baby boomers what Christmas is supposed to be all about. We welcome Monsignor David Tonks as our special guest on The Beat Goes On. Monsignor David Tonks, welcome to The Beat Goes On.
Thank you very much, Gerard.
They've taken Christmas away from the Catholic Church.
I guess that the commercial world has highlighted Christmas, that's for sure, and made it maybe even a bigger feast than it may have been previously. St. Nicholas was, a saint of the early church who had a tradition for gift giving, and I think that perhaps was it Coca-Cola that developed the modern-day Santa? Perhaps it related to, this bishop who came from Mysia, I think, in Northern Europe.
All us baby boomers, we spent thousands of Saturday afternoons way in the distance. There was this wonderful, sort of the sound of New Zealand was a race being called, and Sid Tonks was the caller, and that happened to be your father.
Correct, Gerard. Wow. And I loved horse racing, still love horse racing. I used to go to the races every Saturday with my father from about the age of 12. I'd be up there in the commentary box with him, where perhaps you had the best view of the whole racetrack. I would, as the horses went across the finishing line, I'd write the numbers down and give them to Dad to make sure that he could remember when he was the finishing order. Later he became the handicapper as well as the commentator, so I worked with him quite a lot in assisting him with handicapping as well. So yeah, racing's in my blood.
You actually learnt a skill, didn't you? You heard your father calling those races, and you would have learnt by osmosis, wouldn't you? But you decided to become a priest. What a completely different racing's that way, being a priest is that way. What happened?
Well, I think there are a lot of Catholics involved in horse racing, even still now. But my father, my mother were very committed in their faith. We were parishioners of the church at Ellerslie, which is quite appropriate, isn't it, considering the Ellerslie racecourse just along the road.
Too coincidental.
Yes. And so I guess my parents helped me to grow in the Catholic faith from a very early age. And when I finished my schooling, I'd been thinking for quite some time about being a priest. And I remember my father said to me, you go off to do the training with our love and support, but if it's not the right thing, we welcome you home also.
That was nice, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I think those words of my father, when I went, were tremendously encouraging, because, I had to go and discern, is this where God's leading me or not? And Dad and my mother would stand by me either way.
So there was no pressure from Mum or Dad to be a priest?
That
was entirely your decision?
Yeah.
Now, along the way, were there any doubts creep in? Any doubts creep in at any stage that you wrestled with this decision?
Oh, questions about, I saw some of my friends having families and thinking, well, I'm never going to be able to have any children if I'm a Catholic priest, because Catholic priests don't marry. Thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a special person in my life that I could share that life with as a spouse? But again, you wrestle with those things and you realise that they're goods, they're wonderful things, but I'm called in a different way.
Should you be made to wrestle with those things? Why deny you that wonderful gift of having a family and a special person in your life? Why would they deny wonderful young men that gift?
Well, I suppose we've had celibacy in the tradition of the church for many years. It's in the Latin church, the Western Catholic Church, not in the Eastern Catholic Church.
So it's just a man-made decision, isn't it?
It's it was decided, I suppose, over a whole period of time.
But by men,
Yeah,
which
sure.
if it can be decided by men, it can be undecided by
Sure,
men, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
There could have been 1,000 more priests available to do the work of God if they didn't have this celibacy rule.
That, I'm sure, is correct. I suppose for me, celibacy leads to two things. Number one, it leads to my being more available for people than if I had family commitments. And I think that's quite significant. And I suppose for many people, they see the Catholic priest's commitment to his ministry as a real sign of he's there full on, he's not there half measures. Secondly, I think that celibacy has meant that I have to have a particular openness to God, because ultimately, when in a marriage, you might have a husband and wife who share things with one another, who are there for one another, who talk over problems, who encourage. I guess I've had to discover that my best friend is God. And so it's the Lord that I come to with the secrets of the heart to talk over the problems, and who's my special source of strength.
Martin Luther said, look, you can actually communicate with Jesus yourself. You don't have to do it through a priest. Now, this was an astounding idea at the time, a private relationship with Jesus Christ. Is that still continuing, that same trend that do you really need an institution or a church to help you make contact with Jesus Christ?
Jude, I'd say,
or the Spirit of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, Jude, I'd say two things. Number one, that we can all certainly have a personal relationship with Jesus, and I think that's hugely important. Pope Francis has just written a beautiful apostolic letter to the whole world, and one of the things that he says in that is, come to Jesus every day, talk to Jesus, and allow him to talk to you. So the Catholic Church highlights the significance of a personal relationship with the Lord. It's tremendously important. But I think that what the Church also says is that we don't maintain our faith all by ourselves. The Church says in this, we travel as followers of Jesus together, and so the Church is there so that people can help one another walk the journey, help one another and challenge one another and inspire one another to reach out with hands of love to the world, help one another to keep on growing in faith. So I think it's the both and. I mean, when I was a child, I probably grew up with a sense of being part of the institution, as children do. But I would never have stayed part of the institution if at some point I didn't discover that I needed a personal relationship with the Lord. So it's both, I think.
Look, we're here to talk about Christmas.
Okay.
Not about the... It's funny how you get digress into other subjects. Sure, yes. This is our last show of the year, David, so we wanted to talk about Christmas, and how does the Roman Catholic Church now see Christmas? It's up against all the big corporations and all the presents, all the advertising on television. Does the Catholic Church sometimes get lost in the flurry of Christmas activity?
Historically, what was Christmas? Well, it was simply the birth of a baby in a place called Bethlehem around about 4 or 5 BC. And Bethlehem was a little outback town in the whole of the Roman Empire. And what was another birth? That's, in some ways, to look at it at one point of view, that's all it was. It was the birth of a baby in Bethlehem. But what's the significance of that? I think the significance, as that baby grew, and as people saw that baby in action, Jesus, involved touching the lives of the needy and the poor, they began to realize that in what he did and in what he said, God was in him in an extraordinary way. So when we see Jesus as, if you like, God entering creation, God entering God's creation to walk and live alongside human beings in order to bring them a new hope, to bring them new life, to bring them God's love.
Midnight Mass, that's the biggie with the Roman Catholic Church, isn't it, with Christmas time? So many people that aren't even associated with the church, I've heard them say, I'm going to Midnight Mass.
That's correct, yes.
Amazing, isn't it? Like people who don't bet at the races always put something on the Melbourne Cup.
That's right.
Is the Midnight Mass at Christmas the equivalent of the Melbourne Cup?
Certainly it's something that brings a lot of extra people. Christmas, Midnight Mass or Christmas Day celebrations bring people to church, and I think that's beautiful. I suppose it's saying that somewhere in people's hearts, even though they may not be active members of the church anymore, somewhere in their hearts there's a little whispering of God and a little desire for something more than Christmas presents can offer.
So if anyone wants to go to midnight mass, if they're sort of, after hearing you talk, they'd like to, where's the best place to go for a midnight mass? I mean, all over, of course, New Zealand, but St. Patrick's would be a great choice, wouldn't it?
Well, Gerard, in Auckland, certainly St. Patrick's Cathedral, there are probably as many people outside St. Patrick's Cathedral at midnight mass as there are inside. The church is crammed with probably over 1,000 people inside and about 2,000 outside. They have a big screen,
yes,
so that what's happening inside is broadcast outside. I know people who bring along cushions so that they can sit in St. Patrick's Square and watch the screen. It's on a hot night, it's more pleasant outside than in the heat of the cathedral.
So before we go, David, you still put a few dollars on the horses after being the son of Sid Tonks?
Gerard, I think my last bet was in the Melbourne Cup. I backed the horse that ran second, strangely enough, so I had a little return there.
Where was God in that decision?
And I imagine that over the Christmas New Year period I may have a few bets. Maybe about once every 6 weeks I'll have a bet, but I'm too busy really with pastoral work to be able to spend a lot of time these days with racing.
Great talking to you, and I think the only thing left to say is, in the tradition of the church and the world, is to say Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Gerard. Same to you too. God bless.
Thank you, David. And coming up next on The Beat Goes On, we welcome Michelle Rush from Real Life Counselling.